Hello, I'm Dr. Foojan Zeine and welcome to Inner Voice Show. On this episode, we're going to talk about relationship, finances, and a whole lot more. So stay tuned. Hi, I'm Dr. Foojan Zeine. I'm a psychotherapist. I'm an author and an international speaker. I have hosted my own television show, Inner Voice, in a satellite program for 16 years. Whether it's premarital counseling or through their marriage, how to deal with children, and if they're going through a divorce, to teach them how to communicate better together. In actuality, I think my job is very important to work with individuals and the couples in order to make the most important relationship of their life healthy, which makes them healthy. On my Inner Voice show, I actually interview some of the prominent psychologists and entertainers in English, and I also speak to some of the psychotherapists who are Iranians and the artists who are Iranians, and I speak in Persian to the Persian population around the world, from Iran or Europe or Japan, Australia, all over the United States and Canada, because obviously I was born in Iran.
Where's Dr. Zeine? Dr. Zeine?
Hello.
You also have been trained in my specific methodology and techniques, correct?
Yes.
Are you willing to talk to her after this show?
Absolutely.
And tell her the step-by-step that she needs to do to deal with what I believe is an addictive personality?
Yes, absolutely. The family goes through a lot. For boys who are becoming girls, the fathers of the family suffer. They will keep being confused. They look at all the childhood pictures that they've took of their son, and now they look at somebody who's standing in front of them and supposed to be their daughter. Coming up, I'm going to be talking to a psychotherapist about awareness integration model. You really want to know what that is, huh? Coming up. Stay tuned. Hi, I'm Dr. Foojan Zeine, psychotherapist, and I'm here with Nasreen Barkhordari, licensed marriage and family therapist. We're going to talk about awareness integration model, a psychological model that I have originated, and Nasreen Barkhordari is one of the first therapists who has actually learned and has been utilizing it with her clients. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for inviting me. This is an honor.
Some of the major topics that I actually talk to my clients who are couples are first talking about sexuality. Many people don't know how to talk about sex. Concept of communication about it is something that I actually have to teach the couples and how to do. We talk about sexuality. Many people come into their sexuality in a very automatic way. We can go through the whole experience and wham, have a great time, but being with another human being, it actually takes skills. So becoming aware of every area of how we think, how we behave, how we feel, how we communicate with another human being in order to have an amazing sexuality is part of what we also teach in this AI model.
So much of our sexuality.
People don't talk about finances a lot. They don't have a system. They come from two backgrounds of how they actually have created their finances, and I have to help them create a system and have a great communication in how to follow the system. Another main topic is when they actually have children. Now remember, two people, two backgrounds, two cultures, two sets of values are coming in, and now they actually have to bring those together, and that's where they need how to communicate, be flexible, and really negotiate on one way of handling their kids. Duet, sometimes you guys are entering each other's space and singing together, and then solo. How does that experience for you?
The funny thing is,
in-laws, we have to deal with them. They're always there. They're going to be there. We didn't marry them, but they came with a package. So somehow we have to really, really work with them. And if I have to actually add one more topic that I've had to deal with a lot of couples and individuals is addiction. Whether it's an addiction to alcohol or drugs, pornography, cell phone, computers, is one aspect that really, really affects the person's life and in their relationship. With people who are going through recovery from addiction, they've had some sort of a trauma in their childhood. And when we've worked with the awareness integration model with them, clearing the trauma, the choice and the chance for them to relapsing is really minimized. I have been in the field of psychology for about 25 years. I started with seminars in ontology and psychology almost the same time. And I know you were part of the pilot study that we did, and in the result of that pilot study was that people were actually minimizing the depression 76%. They were minimizing anxiety 64%, and their self-esteem was rising about 43%. Now those are astonishing numbers.
You know, I wanted to go through it. I wanted to experience what my clients would experience. So I asked you to work on me as a model for the group that was being trained.
Hey everyone, thanks for watching. If you like what you see, you can see more on my website and my YouTube channel. And if you want to contact me, I'm on Facebook and Twitter. Bye-bye. Hello, I'm Dr. Foojan Zeine, and welcome to the Inner Voice Show, the show that's about you and all that matters to you. I interview with the expert in the field of psychology and psychiatry. And today we're going to talk about something that is very important to all of you, and is probably very intrigued about it, sometimes scared of it. Yes, teenage brain. Yes, teenage brain. It's something unknown for all of us. I'm going to talk to Dr. Daniel Siegel, which I feel honored and excited to have him on my show. We did one more show before, so if you are interested in seeing the last show that we had, you can go to my YouTube channel and see that show before you see this one, or see this one and then see the other one. So let me tell you a little bit about Dr. Siegel. Dr. Daniel Siegel received his medical degree from Harvard University and completed his postgraduate medical education at UCLA with training in pediatrics and child, adolescent, and adult psychiatry. He is currently clinical professor of psychiatry at the UCLA School of Medicine, where he is on the faculty of the Center for Culture, Brain, and Development, and the founding co-director of the Mindful Awareness Research Center. An award-winning educator, he is a distinguished fellow of the American Psychiatric Association and recipient of several honorary fellowships. He's also the executive director of the MindSight Institute. Dr. Siegel is the author of numerous books: The Developing Mind, MindSight, The New Science of Personal Transformation, Parenting from the Inside Out, How a Deeper Self-Understanding Can Help You Raise Your Children Who Thrive, and the New York Times bestseller, The Whole Brain Child, 12 Revolutionary Strategies to Nurture Your Child's Developing Mind. Dr. Siegel's latest release is the New York Times bestseller, Brainstorm, The Power and Purpose of the Teenage Brain. He's also lectured for the King of Thailand, Pope John Paul II, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, Google University, London's Royal Society of Arts, and TEDx. I'm so excited to have Dr. Siegel with us. Welcome to our show.
Thank you, Foojan. A pleasure to be here.
I know that the first time I met you was actually, I think, at the Ericksonians Masters Conference, and many, many years ago, where I heard you were the first one that I heard, at least, that had brought so much research from the Buddhist and the other aspects of the world that was usually put aside from the spiritual psychology and was not entered, and you had brought so much research and started the concept of the mindfulness psychotherapy, and then you have also founded the research at the UCLA and your own center for that. And I know that it's gone worldwide, and there's so many institutes right now that they are following your footsteps and bringing that. And I know that in your Brainstorm, which is about the teenage brain, that you've also brought a lot of the mindfulness into that book and how that can be utilized. So let's talk about the latest book that you have.
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. It's an honor to be back with you. The Brainstorm book takes a lot of information from, as you're pointing out, a range of sciences, and then combines them together to allow adolescents to understand how their own mind works, what the brain is all about and how it changes during adolescence, and the importance of relationships. So that's basically what the adolescent who reads the book gets, and the parent who reads the book gets a deep insight into what's going on with their adolescent. They learn, for example, that the teenage years are just the beginning of adolescence, that adolescence actually goes on to the mid to late 20s. And so that's shocking for a lot of parents, and a lot of other myths we explore and then debunk and try to bring out the truths to empower the reader to actually make some really positive changes in their life.
One of the greatest concepts about this book is that you've written it in a way that it's appealing to the teenager and the family, so they both can read this. It's not like, okay, it's a teenager book and the parents get bored at it or they don't receive anything at it, or nor that it's only information for the parent and the teenager is not appealing. It seems like the understanding is there, and it's written in a way that is exciting for both group, but also it has exercises for both. As I saw the book, and I have the book, there are some exercises particularly for the teenagers, and there's particular exercises in the approach that the parents can take in communication and connecting to the teenager. One of the aspects that I read in the book is the way that they connect, because I know that you also come from a background of attachment theory, that the way that they connect, that many times we don't want to be, but at times we find ourselves to be in a punitive position with our teenagers. And your suggestion was more of connecting versus being punitive, because that just doesn't work with the way that their brain works.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, with Tina Bryson, I wrote 2 books, Whole Brain Child and No Drama Discipline, which try to address the notion that parents have often taken the word discipline and they think that it means punishing or being punitive, where in fact discipline means to teach. And one of the best ways we can teach is to connect with our children, whether they're adolescents or adults or younger children. And so this is the fundamental principle, I think, that attachment research teaches us. It's about connection. So in Brainstorm, I wanted to write a book for adolescents and their parents and anyone else who cares for adolescents to actually understand what is the way we can connect with an adolescent, or if you're an adolescent, how do you connect with your parents or yourself or your peers in a way that actually promotes well-being. So this was the idea of the book, and I had 2 teenagers at home at the time when I started writing it, and now they're in their 20s, but I was really, really shocked at how the information we get out in the public domain from the media, from some therapists, from pediatricians, from teachers, from other parents, everything I was taught, for example, turns out to be really not quite right, like issues about raging hormones, or there's nothing you can do about adolescence, you should just get over it as soon as possible. It turns out that those statements are not only wrong, but they actually disempower both parents and their adolescents. And instead, the truth is actually quite empowering, that it's about brain remodeling, and you can do something about that as a parent and as an adolescent. That's why I wrote the book for both generations.
And when you talk about remodeling, one of the concepts of the book is that most parents, and as you said, maybe media, presents teenagehood as if it's just a transitional concept that we just have to hang in there until it's done. Whether the teenager is like, oh my gosh, just hang in there, a couple of more days, and a couple of more years, and you will be an adult, and you don't have to go through this. And many times this is our reaction to the parents. Oh my God, you got teenager. Wow, I don't envy you. Just hang in there for a couple of more years. But something that you had said in the book, which is, this is not a transitional stage that we just have to hang in. It's a very important stage of life that we need to be attending to it, and we need to be aware of it. And not only that, the teenager, the more self-awareness they have through the mindfulness, that they get to see and regulate their emotion and their behavior and everything that goes on with them and understand themselves. And the same thing happens with the parents, that if they take that middle stage of the teenage years and maybe 10 years that is there, and look at each stage as something wonderful and getting to know that part, fostering that part, appreciating that part, that also creates that type of a connection.
Absolutely.
You know, and that's the amazing thing when you get information out there, whether it's in the media like you're doing here with me, or in a book form, or in a conversation that you have casually over dinner with some friends. The more we can get the truth out about adolescence, the better it's going to be for everyone. Because what happens basically is, let's take the common myth that's found in every country I've spoken at, and I speak all around the world. Every country has the belief adolescence is a period of raging hormones. Now, if you take a moment and think about it, let's say that were true. You have these molecules called hormones, which when the teenage years begin, let's say with puberty, these hormones start raging. They start getting filled with anger. And what would you do? Would you like filter your blood and give these molecules anger management lessons? How would you handle that? You'd feel like you were possessed by some kind of being that is going to destroy your life. That view, unfortunately, is wrong. Hormones rise, they don't rage. And the issue with rising hormones is that you have more intense feelings, sexual feelings, changes in moodiness, all sorts of things can happen. Now, this approach helps you understand that the major change in adolescence is not raging hormones. What is it? It's a remodeling brain. What can you do about it? How you focus your attention, how you spend your time with your mind, including how you relate to other people, shapes the activity of the brain in the moment and the development of the structure of the brain in the short term. And the long term, you can actually grow circuits as you build up this connectivity in the brain. And the overall thing we try to achieve in adolescence is something called integration, which is the basis for well-being and all sorts of other good things. And so when you teach people skills that allow them to use their mind, to activate their brain in an integrative way, which is what these mindsight skills are, then people can learn how to actually approach their life with more empowerment and with more well-being.
So one of the first things that is part of the exercises that you give is what you call time in, which is instead of going constantly out there and paying attention to what's out there, to also spend the time of coming in and being with yourself.
Yeah.
And then the second part that you also were talking about was lack of sleep and how much sleep, especially a teenager, needs. So the time in is the time of a little bit of a reflection and awareness inside, plus the time that they actually need to sleep enough in order to integrate all the data that they've gone and for the development of their brain, right? And I know you have 7 steps. Can you go through the steps that you offer to in your book?
Absolutely. Well, you know, these points of view, these suggestions, come from a field called neuroplasticity. And what neuroplasticity is the study of how your brain is going to grow well and stay healthy in response to experience. So the first thing before we get into the 7 is just to say that when an adolescent or an adult learns that what I do with my time, with the focus of my attention, which is part of your mind, with my body, with the way I'm actually eating, what I do with my sleep, all these different things affect your well-being. They affect how the brain grows, as one example. So what I did a long time ago now with a fellow named David Rock is we put these findings of the studies of neuroplasticity, which are available to everyone, and we just put them together on what we call the Healthy Mind Platter. Because it was right when the U.S. Department of Agriculture was releasing a new suggestion on what the food groups you should eat are on a daily basis, and we thought, why not have something about the daily activities you could use for the mind? These suggestions come purely from the study of neuroplasticity. So they're scientifically grounded views. They're not just opinions. They're suggestions based on science. So what do we know? You mentioned one very, very important for not just adolescents, but for all of us, sleep. Sleep, it turns out, is a time when you actually allow your brain to shift its state and to start, we believe, cleaning up the toxins that are naturally released during the waking hours. So when you're focusing attention and you're awake, your brain is working really hard. It's like you can compare this to the analogy of being at a party and you're entertaining your guests at the party. That's all fine. Entertaining is great. But when the guests leave, now it's time to clean up. So you can't entertain and clean up at the same time. The same thing is true with the brain. When the brain is turned on, it's busy, 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 and it's putting out all this junk. And then it needs to turn off and do the cleanup work to get rid of the toxins. So when you sleep, it's not just that you're tired, you got to sleep, now you're waking up. You're letting your brain do its cleanup. It's been entertaining all day long, and now it's time to go to sleep. The problem is, number one, adolescents have a shift where they tend to want to go to sleep later, but school is requiring that they get up earlier, so that's a problem. Number two, these adolescents these days, in modern city life at least, are very, very engaged in a lot of activities, over-subscribed for their activities, so they don't have enough time to do their homework, so they stay up late, they have to get up early to go to a practice. They're not getting enough sleep, and when you don't get enough sleep, the result is your insulin doesn't work right, so your metabolism gets thrown off and you start gaining weight and you start being at risk of having diabetes. Your ability to fight off infections isn't so great because your immune system isn't functioning so well. The capacity for you to deal with stress is challenged. The ability for you to focus your attention is challenged. The capacity to remember stuff is challenged. And in all these ways then, whether it's your mental life for school or your physical life for keeping your body healthy, it's not good. So if you had to start anywhere, it would be get enough sleep. Set an alarm that tells you when to go to bed. You know, of course you have to get up a certain time, but if you know I've got to get up at 6:30 to get to school, okay, most people need about 8 to 9 hours of sleep in adolescence, right? So just go backwards. If it's 6.5 hours, you're going to need at least to go to bed, right?
Right.
9:30, which, what adolescent does that?
No one.
Nobody.
No one does that.
Did I do my math right? I think I may have done my math wrong. It's more like 10:30.
Yeah.
Let's do an hour and a half and 6.5. Yeah, it's 10:30. So it would be 10:30. That's more doable, right? But they stay up till midnight, till 1. So this is a big, big issue.
And their fun is to actually spend time until 2 and 3 because they want to cross all the boundaries. So midnight is normal, but they specifically want to be with their friends until 2 to 3 a.m.
I know. And so then what happens? They got to get up. They've had 4 hours sleep. It's not just that they're tired, although there's this kind of attitude, oh yeah, I just got 4 hours sleep. Your brain is filled with junk that you didn't clean up. So, and you can't think so clearly. So of course then you get more irritable and all this kind of thing. So sleep is so, so important. I'll say one more thing about sleep before we move on to another one of the 7 things for adolescents and adults. And that is this. It's our smartphones, right? If you take your smartphone, right? If I take this thing and I look at email before I go to bed or I start chatting, you know, it's going to wake up my brain. When you start zapping your eyes with the light, the photons, from those screens, even computers, by the way. So I don't do any computer work anymore after 8 p.m. for myself. I've noticed if I do it, I'm just wide awake. So you need to really modify things. And of course, kids have got to do homework on their computers. I understand that. But giving yourself a good 45 minutes to an hour before you're ready to go to sleep and close your eyes without any screens would be ideal if you can do that.
Dr.
So
Siegel,
we want to really respect the body's need for sleep.
Dr. Siegel, you hit the third one is actually focusing on one thing at a time, and the same conversation that we've had about sleep where it's the opposite of what teenagers want to do. They really, really shun away from focusing on one thing. They want to have the TV on, they want to have a music on, they want to do their school studying while they have all these stimulus on, and then they have their smartphone beside them, which constantly dings and tweets at every single interaction of something in the Facebook and something in the Instagram and all these new apps that are coming up, and every second one of them is letting you know that there's some other notification there because somebody posted some sort of a message or a picture there. So there's so many intrusions are there, and they invite it, while part of what your suggestion is you need to really focus at one thing at a time.
Right.
So let's look at that. Let's take that apart. You know, it starts very early on because, you know, these things that you're mentioning, Foojan, are just built into our culture these days. So let's review them. One is when kids get used to just straight on television, the speed at which scenes change has been increasing. So we're kind of training these young brains to watch a scene not for 2 minutes, not even for a minute, but it's getting down to 20 seconds, 15 seconds, 10 seconds sometimes. So you're boom, 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 switch the scene. So you're used to external shifts keeping you engaged rather than focusing on one thing at a time and letting your brain develop a whole complex set of reflections and associations and amalgamations with the one thing you're paying attention to. All the other exciting stuff happens in your brain as you're making networks of association. So now think about it this way. Instead of doing that with the focus of attention on one thing, now I've got this thing going for 10 seconds, then my phone bings, it's Instagram, then something else bings, it's Facebook, then I'm getting a tweet, and all these things are happening. I got all this stuff I got to do, email, this. So I'm engaged, in quotes, with this externally driven shift in attention, and there's literally no space in my brain's functioning or the way my mind is experiencing it to make internal connections. So when you talk to kids who live like that, and adults, everything is very superficial. There's a quality of being externally focused rather than internally, you know, complex and sophisticated and well developed. It's a huge difference. On the outside, everyone looks the same, but when you notice that people can't engage in this focused attention, or even if you talk about connection to other people, if you're going to have a conversation, like the speed of a conversation would go, you say da 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 da, there's a pause, then I take that in, I reflect on what you just said, and I go ba 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 da ba ba ba, and then you go or da ba 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 ba, like that. So we are focused on one thing, our conversation. But what happens instead? People are texting, they're going this, they're looking around, they're completely distracted by just engaging on one thing at a time. So that's why one of these 7, we talked about sleep, the second one, as we're talking about it, would be focus time. Train your mind to stream attention on one thing at a time. It is serious business. It's really, really important for the brain's health to develop these deeper layers of interconnectivity. It's where knowledge is embedded. It's where wisdom comes in. It's where you can have an internal compass that says, I can be in touch with what's going on inside of me. So in that sense, it's related to the third thing we can talk about, which you mentioned, which is time in. And time in is really taking time to what I call sift your mind. Check in with the sensations of your body, that's S. The images inside of you, whether they're auditory or visual, that's the I. the F is feelings or emotions, and T is thought. So at a minimum, there's a lot more that you could focus on, but at a minimum, if you're going to take time in, it's do some practice, even if it's walking around the block and just feeling the sensation on your skin of the air, of just taking in what the images are that are coming at you when you look at the trees, when you hear the birds. You know, feel the emotions of gratitude, of just maybe boredom, which is fine. Whatever it is, it doesn't matter. You're sifting your mind and having a thought, I shouldn't be sifting my mind, and that's fine. Then you pay attention to that thought. I shouldn't be doing this. But do it anyway, because it's really good for you. The science of time in, which is a word I use for all these different practices, which includes mindfulness, but it's not limited to mindfulness. Time in is an incredibly important way that we activate this circuitry literally in our nervous system that integrates everything together and can change an entire day. If you do a time in practice, the day will be different than if you don't.
And you also have spoken about playtime, which is again interesting because playtime for teenagers have also changed where, you know, with time, and now playtime has become electronics. They stand around and their playtime has become doing video games with each other, and they might socialize through video games, but each person might be in their own room or in their own home or even in their own country, and they're playing with each other through the games, and that has become part of the socialization, and game has become part of just fun, and has created some sort of an addiction where you have teenagers sometimes leaving everything to come back to that type, especially boys. With girls, you have more of the connection of being together and talking together and you know, going and being socially, physically around each other. And then on the playtime, which you've also in reality has been introduced, is they see it as playtime with drug time. Like we socialize and then our play is use drugs or alcohol together and just kind of like hang out in that socialization, but somehow the culture has brought a lot of drugs in there. And these are again exactly against what their brain really needs. So it's interesting about how it is that neuroscience shows, the science shows what the brain of the human teenager needs, and yet there's all of these other pieces that are around it that pulls them to do exactly the opposite of what they need. How do you see that?
Yeah, well, it's so important that you're articulating this. Thank you. You know, the playtime idea, just to start with the basics, is that so often in life we're in situations where we're being judged, we're being evaluated, that we have to be really cautious about the kind of things that we do because we're worried people will assess that we did it poorly, or, you know, this kind of thing. So the idea of playtime would be different, for example, than someone playing on an athletic team where they knew the rules of the game and they either did it well or not well, and they either beat the other team or didn't. So what we mean by playtime in general in science, and we had a whole conference on play just this year, is the idea of being spontaneous, of having a sense of joy, of not being evaluated at all, of having freedom, and in this, literally this kind of playtime, you could do it on the internet if it was meeting these criteria, but more often things that are being done in order to do something with a certain outcome in mind. So the playtime that we are often lacking is the idea of just letting go and being spontaneous, often connecting with other people. A good example would be improv, doing improvisational acting, just for the sheer fun of it.
That's
you don't get evaluated, you connect with other people, a lot of laughter comes out, and it's something that has no other purpose than just the joy of doing the thing itself. So that's what we mean by playtime. And that fourth one, we're talking about playtime, in a way is a little different than what you can call downtime, which would be, I think, more like what you're talking about the party, where people just hang out, and it's important to just have nothing you're trying to do. Even you're not even particularly trying to have fun. You're just, you can read a book, you go for a walk, whatever you do, but it's downtime where there's nothing, there's no goal there. One of the problems with adolescents and downtime is they can feel really bored, and because of not the hormones that are running around their bloodstream, but because we now believe there's a change in the reward system of the brain. So the basic chemical which helps the reward system work is called dopamine, and the baseline levels are low and the release levels are high, which basically makes an adolescent feel a little restless when they don't have something to do. And then when they do something new and sometimes risky and dangerous, they release dopamine, so it feels rewarding. That's one of the basic issues with adolescent risk when you combine that with something called hyper-rational thinking, which is they rationalize, that's the hyper-rational part, in their thoughts, that's the thinking part, why doing something that's dangerous is okay, and they don't pay much attention to what they know about, which is the risk involved. They kind of minimize the risk and focus primarily on the exciting aspects of something, which can be something that's very dangerous, that combination along with the dopamine shift. So all that being said, we want to try to encourage adolescents to understand that downtime is important, playtime is also important, focus time is important, time in is important, and sleeping is important. All these things, but also have them understand that there are ways their brain is necessarily growing. So it's not really it's not a period of immaturity. It's a necessary shift in the way the brain is to get this individual ready to leave the home. And part of it is to use these daily activities to create a healthier brain. Each of these practices, downtime, focus time, time in, time to just sleep well, all of these things are really important for growing a healthy brain.
And the other two parts were physical activity and activities that also create connection with peers. So let's talk about also those two to complete the 7.
Absolutely. So, the connecting time is really about connecting with other people and the planet. So with gratitude and generosity, you can connect to people and the planet. What this means is basically we are not alone in this life. We are a part of a human family, and having close friends is one of the most important aspects of well-being. And studies are also now showing what I think people have known for a long, long time. Being in nature is extremely important. Even if you live in the city, taking time to look at some trees, to look up at the sky, to look at the moon, these things are all really, really important. So connecting time is a phrase you can use for connecting with other people and with nature. So that's vitally important, and a lot of kids are so busy in front of their smartphones and their computer screens, they don't take time to connect with other people face to face, and they don't take time to connect with nature. So these things are definitely challenged in modern times. And the final one, of course, is, as you mentioned, is physical time, and this is literally time to be moving your body around. So we sit way too much, especially as therapists, we sit too much, and getting up and moving around is really, really important. Being active, as long as medically you're able to do that, is something important to do throughout the lifespan. And unfortunately, as we know, in the United States, obesity is becoming this huge, huge problem. A third of the population massively overweight and at risk of getting diabetes. Yes. And one of the things we think is primarily associated with that, among lots of other things that could be there, but one of them is the lack of physical activity. So physical activity not only keeps your body healthy, it keeps your brain growing well and your mind sharp.
When we talk about the parents talking to the children, what I understood from your book, Brainstorm, and please go to www.drsiegel.com and you can look at all of his books. You could go to amazon.com and get it's called Brainstorm.
DrDanSiegel.com.
Dr. Dan Siegel, sorry. We've already, it's written, so hope you can see it at the bottom of the screen. When it comes to parents, as I hear you, they also have to understand and not look at everything that's going on with their child, with their teenager, as bad and wrong. More, they need to look at it as this is part of the natural process that it happens. And the more that they learn about who their teenager is and how their brain function is going and what their thoughts and emotions are like, and they can create a balanced structure from outside, a balanced structure of physical activity, the connection with nature, to put time for sleep, to create time for homework, to create a household that is structured all together for all of them in a healthy manner, so that they can also role model from their parents and connect to them and listen to them. And the other part that I hear from you is if a teenager understands the process that's going through them, the way that their brain is developing, and becomes aware of all of the thought process and the emotions, and the concept of needing more dopamine or reward, and getting bored, and what they can do to understand what boredom means, and what they can do when they get bored, and what to look at as far as the consequences that might happen. In that way, they might also be able to choose challenges in their life that are might be more constructive versus destructive. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, exactly.
That's the empowerment, for sure.
So what would you say to the parent to create, what should they create for their teenager in order to minimize some of the damage that is getting created by, for example, the level of addictions that are getting created within the teenagers, whether they're drugs and alcohol, or whether they're games or pornography, that is the age that kids are have the ability to be accessing it is higher. So with the pressures that society is already putting on the teenagers, especially if they see their peers are constantly utilizing that, with the latest science and suggestions that you have, what would you be able to suggest to the parents in how to create the system in their household which can foster more a healthy level of teenagehood as their teenagers are trying to push all the boundaries and create more rewards for themselves?
Yes.
Great question. Thank you. I guess what I would say is this. There's something you can call parental presence, P-R-E-S-E-N-C-E, parental presence. And when you look at all the research on the outcomes of child development as they are connected to what we can do as parents, because of course genes determine some things, random things determine other things, peer groups affect other things. There's lots of things that affect development, but the things we can have a big say in are basically the ways we communicate with our kids. And adolescence is no different than that earlier period of time. It's just that you do it in a different way, so it still remains important. So parental presence is a term that means how have you as a parent come to create a kind of spaciousness of mind, so as your child transitions into adolescence, you, for example, if you've read the Brainstorm book, you will know that this is about brain remodeling, that is millions of years of evolution that have set this up, that this happens in other mammals, that your child is not inventing adolescence. It is something that is biologically programmed into our genes as mammals to do. As human beings, of course, it becomes very intricate because we are complex creatures. So parental presence means, number one, you're open to understanding the truth about what adolescence is. Another aspect of parental presence that I talk about in a book called Parenting from the Inside Out that I wrote with Mary Hartzell is that research is very clear. Parental presence can be thought of as how you have made sense of your own childhood experiences. So when you reflect on your past and what your own childhood was like, how your parents treated you, how you adapted to that way of being treated, the way in which you are now developing through adolescence and into adulthood, and now, perhaps if you're a parent, how you're understanding that childhood set of experience affects your parenting. All these things in Parenting from the Inside Out, we review how to make sense of your life, because the number one predictor of your child's attachment to you is actually how you've made sense of your life. So parents who've made sense of their life have something I call parental presence. It's a spaciousness of mind, so that what I mean by spaciousness is this. When your adolescent does something that irritates you, instead of just becoming reactive and fighting with them back, you have a space to pause and reflect, take time in, and reflect on what's going on inside of you. Oh, my muscles are tense, I'm raging, I'm really upset. And anyone can get upset. In fact, the reason I write all the examples of my goof-ups when I'm a parent in my parenting books is so that parents can understand there's no such thing as perfect parenting. There is intentional parenting where you have parental presence, which allows you to create the conditions of what I call integration. That is, honoring where your adolescent is, the difference between what you expect and what they're having has the actual thing that's going on, and coming with what you can call COAL, state of mind, C-O-A-L. You're curious about what's happening. You want to know more about what your adolescent is feeling, what they're thinking, what they're going through. You're open to what's happening. It's the O, C-O. The A is you accept it being what it is, because it is what it is. You can push back, but it is what it is. And L is love. When you take a COAL stance, in many ways you're being mindful, but the bigger issue is you're being present. You're fully present for what your adolescent is going through. And this pathway of developing parental presence, if you had to ask me the one thing I would suggest about how do you create a home during the adolescent period so that your adolescent will feel like they have a home base they can draw upon as they use your family as a launching pad to go out in the world, which is what adolescence is all about. When they come back as young adults, you're going to be very happy, I'll predict, because you've set the stage for your presence in their life.
And adolescence make us grow because they confront us. It's very different than childhood, where they're just taking in everything we say, but in the years of adolescence they challenge everything we say, and it becomes very challenging for us. And as you said, if we're not present to our own growth and successes and failures, and we're not open to seeing and creating even corrective actions for ourselves and the things that are not appropriate, or we're not creating appropriate results in our life, and then as we request it from our adolescents, they're right in front of us saying, well, you didn't do it, or don't smoke, how come you do, or any of the things that we kind of take it for granted and come up with justifications that we want to do whatever we want to do, and then somehow have an expectation of our adolescents to listen to us, and then they come back and create an amazing mirror in front of us, letting us know that we're not walking our talk. And this becomes one of the biggest challenges for the parents. And as you said, I think it's a fantastic place to grow from the mirroring effect that now they have for us, because for many, many years as parents, we're the one who have the mirroring effect for them, and now a bit it's getting reversed.
Yeah, well, exactly. Well,
here's the thing that builds on what you're saying, which is so powerful. You know, adolescence sets you up, that period of time, adolescence, sets you up for the rest of your life. So it's a really important phase of life. It's not a period of immaturity. It's a necessary, different set of things that go on. I remember this with something called the essence of adolescence, which is an emotional spark, ES, social engagement, SE, novelty seeking, and creative exploration. And the way you can remember this is that this essence of the remodeling of the adolescent brain has downsides and upsides. So just to take one as an example, the emotional spark. The adolescent's brain is more emotional than a kid's brain or an adult's brain. It's just true. The downside, you can get irritable and moody as an adolescent. The upside, you're filled with passion and vitality. So how do we take this essence, in this case we're talking about the first one, emotional spark, and optimize the way an adolescent can understand their emotions. So instead of avoiding the surf of their emotions, they learn how to ride the surf of them, right? That's something you can teach. That's something that's a teachable skill. It's a mind-sight skill. And you can go through each of the other aspects of the essence, but the take-home message is, when you do this intentionally, you come to realize that it is very possible to support adolescents' essence, to optimize the upsides of each of these and minimize the downsides. And then amazingly, when we look at the studies of neuroplasticity for adults, we come to realize that if you as an adult would like to keep your brain growing well throughout your lifespan so it stays vital, it turns out the essence of adolescent brain changes, emotional spark, social engagement, novelty seeking, and creative exploration, are exactly what you need to reclaim if you've lost it, or keep it going if you've held on to it. So that the essence of adolescence is not something that's immaturity that we just want to get through. It's just the opposite. It's something we want to hold on to. Now, I know parents who've lost many of those four. They don't have much passion in their life with an emotional spark. They don't have many friends that they hold close, social engagement. They do the same old thing over and over and over again, like many adults, so no novelty seeking. And they don't try to push the status quo. They've kind of just settled into the status quo. Whereas an adolescent, by the way, is programmed to, unlike a kid who's learning what the world is from adults, I want to know more, know more, know more. Now, the adolescent, instead of saying, tell me about how the world is, they say, I got it. I got the message of my childhood. I'm getting how the world is. I'm going to imagine a world that could be. And this is why, for the individual, it's a source of strength to hold on to that creative exploration. And for our human family, it's the source of some of the most important contributions to art and music, for sure, but even to science and, of course, technology. So when we realize that that creative exploration, yes, is important for adolescents, but it's important for us too, we say, oh my gosh, for any adult who once was an adolescent, finding your essence, emotional spark, social engagement, novelty seeking, creative exploration, very clear, and cultivating those in your life is the best thing you can do for your well-being. And actually, what you do with that kind of presence of mind will be good for your adolescent too.
Very much, because when you do that for yourself, then you don't minimize their creativity, nor you kill it off, because it's so easy with our judgment to attempt to kill off our teenagers' exploration and creativity and things that are going beside and beyond the box, which they love to do. And for us, it might create fear. And if we come only from a fear-based concept of holding them and survival-based concept of only looking at how to survive and not live and grow, then we're also bringing that type of thinking into our home and into our child's brain. And in that way, not only we're killing it off, but in their future, they're going to be the ones who are also going to take this type of a role modeling and kill off their own creativity, which then it equals killing off their passion.
Exactly, exactly. And let me ask you something.
Foojan, do you find, because I've seen this sometimes, but maybe it's just unusual, I find that some parents get really either confused with their adolescents or maybe even upset with them because the adolescent is reminding them, not intentionally, but just by the experience of them being an adolescent, of something that the adult has lost.
What I've noticed a lot, and yes, I sense that a lot. I also, to add to what you're saying, have seen that I think that when we were adolescent, we went beyond some of the boundaries, we risked, and obviously by the age 30s, we probably failed at some things. And at one point, I think the pain of the failures and what ifs of the past, not only the what if of the future, gets to us. Like the grief, the remorse is now there. So now that we have our child, it's almost like I'm going to be protective. I'm not going to let them go through the pain that I did. I learned, so I'm going to enforce what I learned to them and not let them go through the same path of failure, which in some terms, I get it that it's with all good intention, but in some sense, I think that type of protection also kills off their creativity, and we do not allow them to live their life and learn from their life. So yes, because we killed off parts of ourselves because we failed at some and we had harsh consequences on some of them, and when we decided not to have it anymore, we made a decision that I have to be safe now. At age 30s, 40s, I have to be safe. And it's funny, if I'm not playing safe, then I'm going to be called a teenager. And they were going to tell me, the society will tell me that obviously if you're not taking the path that the society says this is the box, so then you're just not mature enough. You're just kind of, delayed onset, and you're kind of...
They'll say in a very dismissing way, how adolescent of you.
Yes.
Which I got to say, after writing the Brainstorm book, I take that as one of the highest compliments.
Yes.
And even Lawrence Steinberg wrote a book called The Age of Opportunity, which is more for, academics to read. It's the review of the research that he's been an active part of. And, what's beautiful about his book, which came out after Brainstorm, is its complete validation for the Brainstorm writing for the parent and the adolescent themselves. And what it says is, if you want to have an optimal adulthood, keep your adolescence going. Extend your adolescence, Because what is that? It's a time of keeping your mind open, of keeping your brain growing well, of not shutting down neuroplasticity and just ending it, but saying, hey, I'm a lifelong learner. I'm going to have passion in my life. I'm going to have people in my life. I'm going to try new things. I'm going to creatively explore. That essence is exactly what we all need, and yet we lose it. We get tired. The day is over. You just want to go and put your feet up and not think about anything. But actually, you'll feel better, and this is why it's been so rewarding with this, the Brainstorm book, with this paperback coming out. I was able to put some of the feedback, not just from adolescents, but I also have gotten feedback from adults. Some of whom don't even have adolescents living with them anymore, but they read the book to remind themselves of what had happened,
yes,
or to try to figure out what had happened.
Yes.
Because it's never too late to make sense of what your adolescence was for you, to cultivate that kind of presence in your life, and then to actually reclaim the essence of that period if you've lost it. So this is the beautiful thing. It's by going to the science, we get very practical, science-based suggestions for how to develop these mind-sight skills, how to keep your essence alive, and how to have a better connection with your adolescent for sure, but even with yourself.
Thank you so much. I always learn a lot from you. It's always a joy to have you on my program, and I hope that you keep saying yes to me as I invite you. So thank you very much for all.
Pleasure to be here.
And for everyone else, thank you so much for being with us. And please go to www.drdansiegel.com and please buy Brainstorm, especially the paperback that's coming out, because it has a lot of feedback from people who've read it, and they're telling you, they're sharing their stories with you. I've read the book, I've taught the book, I have brought this book on this the TV station, even without Dr. Siegel, with other therapists that we've talked about. It's an amazing book. So go right now to drdansiegel.com.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, and create a wonderful life, and I will see you next week.